that means
All right, Dr. Campbell, welcome to the Parent and Community Forum. We're all thrilled to see you here tonight and wish you nothing but the best. Congrats on getting to this point.
Thank you very much.
This is a group made up of folks that represent alumni, parents, grandparents, members of the community from all stakeholder groups, including many, many years of history with ETHS during your current tenure, but also eras gone by. Our questions are based on what we think is important as members of the community, both representing the group of people that are in this room, but also those that are viewing this interview live streamed right now. By a show of hands, instead of us all introducing ourselves, how many of us are lifelong Evanstonians? How many are alumni of ETHS? Parents of current students? Parents of future students? Graduates? Individuals affiliated with Northwestern, District 65, other community organization leadership as well. So there's a lot of love in this room for Evanston, in this town, and for ETHS. And without further ado, we got a few questions for you today.
Awesome. So to start us off, for our first question, we would like to give you an opening opportunity to speak to the community, introduce yourself, and share your background. We're looking for your why. Why ETHS? Why now? And your vision for ETHS in this community.
Thank you, Jesse. Well, good evening. I just want to start by thanking all of you for taking the time out of your schedule to be here and to prep for this moment. It is extremely important for ETHS and it's extremely important for our community. So I just want to start by thanking you for your time and thanking you and the board for an opportunity to be here. So I've been had a number of roles here at ETHS. My CV is going around, my curriculum vitae is going around, as well as a little article that was written up in 1997, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I'm a product of Chicago public school system, and I got the idea that I possibly wanted to be a teacher one day in my junior AP Lit, AP Lang and composition class, where my teacher, Miss Betty Miller, just asked me one day if I could teach a lesson on Camus' The Stranger. And I said, sure. And so I taught the lesson that day, and then I kind of knew, like, wow, I really enjoyed what I just did, and I want to be a teacher. So the next year, I had Miss Miller again for AP Lit, because she was looping. We were a part of, Lindblom at that time was a part of Ted Sizer's Coalition for Essential Schools, and the school was doing some very innovative things regarding, assessments and all kinds of manner of student engagement. And Ms. Miller nominated me to be a Golden Apple recipient. And so I got that award my junior year and, my senior year. And the article that you have there is something that the Tribune wrote on me and my 17-year-old self, explaining why I wanted to be a teacher. And a friend of mine brought that back to my attention a couple of years ago, but it speaks to my commitment today as a black male educator, and I think I said something in there, wanting to be an accessible leader for other black boys and other black children. So that is a constant refrain for me. Being a role model and talking about equity 25 years ago, and my 17-year-old self has been my guiding value over the last 25 years. And so that article was written almost 25 years to the date. It was April 14th, 1997. And here, 25 years later, I find myself interviewing with all of these wonderful people like you to be the superintendent of Evanston Township High School, possibly the first black male to be the superintendent of Evanston Township High School. And so I went on to be a teacher here at ETHS. I knew nothing about Evanston. The only thing I knew about Evanston, Uncle Johnny, was Christ Temple Church, because my cousin was pastoring there. And I would pass ETHS, you know, on our way to Family Focus, where Christ Temple was holding services. So I knew nothing about ETHS. I was going to go back to Lindblom to be a teacher on the South Side, but I quickly recognized that that there was a need for students and to be a role model for students right here in Evanston that I didn't know. And so this is a long story short. I'm just telling you how I got here, because it's pretty interesting. The day of my interview, I was an hour late. I was an hour late because I was commuting from Champaign, Illinois, and which put me in rush hour traffic. And that interview committee decided to wait for me because I was coming from so far. And one of the black male teachers at the time, Stephen Bournet, who was also a Golden Apple Scholar, convinced that committee to wait for me. And I'm so glad they waited for me. I have learned everything that I have come to know about instruction right here at ETHS. Everything that I've come to know about leadership, I've learned right here at ETHS. Given the roles, the many roles that I have had at this school, I have learned so much, and I'm so grateful to have had so many opportunities here to teach almost every level in the English department, from our striving readers to our advanced placement students. I've taught avid students, you know, and I just have had a great time here, and I'm very pleased and happy and fortunate and blessed and humbled to be sitting before you today as a candidate to be superintendent. No one could have paid me 20 years ago to believe that I'd be here 20 years later. That's just, that just wouldn't happen. And so why here, why now? I think I've kind of explained that. Someone asked me, why do you want to be superintendent? And I don't really hear it like that. I don't feel it like that. I simply think this is the next step or the next stage of the work, right? And how to foster and shepherd the work of what we've been doing and what we've been able to do under Dr. Witherspoon's leadership and under the board's governance to be able to move forward. And so I just see this as a moment to move all of our work forward to the place that the board and the community and this school would want to take it.
Good evening. I'm going to ask a question on behalf of Mrs. Rocio Mancera. She's part of the ETHS Latino Advisory Committee. She couldn't make it tonight, and I will say it in English and Spanish. If given the opportunity to serve as our next superintendent, what would you do to be more open and transparent with the Latinx community? In what ways would you support and partner with our community? Si tuviera la oportunidad de ser nuestro superintendente, ¿qué haría para ser más abierto, transparente con la comunidad latina? ¿De qué manera apoyaría y se asociaría con nuestra comunidad?
Thank you for the question. And so I think that one of the keys that is really important to me is to really be genuine and engaging with all stakeholders. We have our Latino Advisory Committee. I like to be, as superintendent, be more proximate to that. But also this notion of, instead of having, parents always come to this building, why can't we go to where our parents are? Why can't we be present where our community members are? And so using the Latino Advisory Committee as a guidepost, I would really like to take thoughts and ideas from them on what does engagement look like. Does it mean showing up in the faith community? Does it mean showing up for certain block parties and things of that nature? I wouldn't want to assume, but really open up a dialogue to really foster the kind of engagement that I think is necessary for the advancement of our Latinx students and the engagement of our Latinx community and our parents. And so it's going to take not just the platforms and the structures that we've already built, but really taking that further and really talking about what that means and what it looks like. I think we have to go out instead of always asking folks to come in.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Campbell. So these last 2 years navigating the COVID-19 pandemic have taught us a bunch of life lessons. I think we've all aged a little bit faster than normal. What is one thing that you're proud of that ETHS did during the pandemic? And then what is one thing that you wish that the school had done differently? That's the first part of the question. And the second part is, if another crisis should occur while you're superintendent.
God forbid. I'm sorry.
Just put it up. We don't know what's going to happen at this point. So if something like that were to happen, how would you apply those lessons to better support our students?
Great. So that's a lot, and I'm going to do the best that I can to be concise, because there's a lot that I could say. I am proud of us doing the best that we could to hold it all together. What do I mean by that? I mean by providing whatever tools our students needed to get through the pandemic, we did that. We provided hotspots, we provided chargers, laptops, cables, batteries, you name it, we did it. We continued to feed kids multiple times a day during the pandemic. Our teachers and our staff remained available at all manner of times and hours to be proximate to our students. I'm really proud of that. Last year, we made 18,000 calls home to make sure that we were keeping track of kids who, if they just missed one block, right, we called. You didn't go. How can we help? Is something wrong? How do we support you? And we really did the best that we could to maintain and foster relational support and institutional trust, a relational trust as a school with our internal stakeholders, namely our teachers. And that was rocky. That got rocky. And just given the nature of the pandemic and what the ask was on teachers and what the political climate just did to schools all across the country. And so we worked really hard at that. And in the course of that crisis, I found myself going to staff and going to teachers, and I even found myself apologizing for things because the relationship that I have with teachers and staff in this building means the world to me, right? And I realize that as a leader, when you've messed up, you've got to correct, right? And come correct and be correct. And so what would we do going forward? If there's another crisis, we'd do the same. I can't really say that we would do something necessarily different, right? Because every conversation and everything that we did was so contextually based. It was so based on context, so based on the data that we had at the time. And I guess one of the things, that we would do and continue to do is to look at the data to drive our decisions and to care for our staff. But that takes me to maybe something that we could have done differently. I would have been and would be more intentional about making sure that the needs and the feelings of our staff are cared for. Right? More listening sessions, what's going on, how can we help, how can we support you, because that goes a long way.
Hi, Dr. Campbell. We haven't met yet. I'm Rabbi Rachel Weiss from the community and all the hats we all are wearing. So our community is rapidly changing, and the speed at which it's changing in many ways is faster than before. In terms particularly of openness to talking about community members and students with disabilities, new immigrant and refugee populations, expanding gender identities and needs, more out LGBTQ+ students, and all of that brings increased social and facilities needs as well. These changes have caused the district to address more community needs, even while some of the communities that are historically underserved remain underserved. So, as our superintendent, how would you include the voices of the full community as experts to shape the future and to strengthen the equity work that's still needed to be done?
That's a great question. Well, we have certain forums in place here at ETHS with regard to our affinity-based summits that we use. And we really spend a lot of time during our affinity-based summits and weeks to really gather from students and staff of those like identities, the intersectional part, but in that particular summit, those like identities to really talk about how do we improve ETHS, facilities, culture, climate, you name it. And just this year, we've started our Abilities Community as a part of our social consciousness series, where our staff and students who carry, identities and with special ed and, all kinds of adults in the Abilities Community really talk about accessibility, bathrooms, and the like. And I think holding space in those forums and in those settings really gives us real-time data on how to improve. I know this summer we're expanding our bathrooms or ADA compliance and some other things that have come out of conversations that we've had with various stakeholders and constituents internally. And so we've kind of built a great model, right, to hear things in real time that matter, and we're proximate to that. And those groups have also found ways to not just meet once a year. I love that we call it a summit, because the summit is the high point, right? But that assumes that there is an increase. That assumes that there's a continuum, all right? That there's a conversation that's happening all year long, and that summit is just where we all come together at that high point. And so I am very proud of the work and the spaces that we have created for our students and staff who carry these identities to feel seen and to feel affirmed, because affinity spaces are affirming spaces, well, they should be affirming spaces, but it also really gives us what we need to move forward in real time to make the necessary changes that we need to make.
Hi, Dr. Campbell.
Hello.
This is Corey. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
You said earlier that you have been here for quite some time, and so my question is that when a new leader is hired from within an organization, it's usually an indicator that there's some stability and continuity in the approach to leadership. So how do you envision your approach to district leadership will be different from Dr. Witherspoon's, to his approach? And then the second part of the question is, in 5 to 7 years, what would you hope would be the greatest accomplishment of the Campbell era up to that time? Refer specifically to your plans for supporting students, student achievement, instruction, connections with the community, and fiscal responsibility and stewardship.
Thank you.
That was a lot.
It is. That's okay. I'm with you. I'm with you. My approach to leadership. There's a certain aspect of Dr. Witherspoon and I that is very similar, right? We're both very relational people, very genuine people, very accessible people, but we're very two different people. I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I identify as a black male. And that in and of itself signals that there will be some different ways to approach things and different perspectives on things. I remain, have been, and will remain very visible for our students and our staff. I think that is really important. But how I engage our teachers and how I engage the community to which the previous two questions alluded to may be a bit different. I like to be proximate, right? I like to feel connected, and that is something that that I will plan to continue, but do it in my own way. As I said, I think that it is important that the superintendent is not just visible internally, but also visible in the community. You know, going to ward meetings, you know, and things of that nature. Just being present outside of the walls. I mean, I love our edifice. You know, I love 1600 Dodge, but there's something to be said for being visible in the places where the people are and our constituents are. And that would be my approach moving. Not to say that Dr. Witherspoon hasn't done that, but that's just something that is very, because he has very much has done that, but very important to me. And 5 to 7 years from now, it's a great question. You know, where's the impact? You know, what's going to be different? And you know, I really like to hang my hat on the post-secondary planning work, right? I really hope, and if I'm fortunate enough to start an entire department that focuses strictly on post-secondary planning and work, like options for kids beyond high school that does not only include college, a four-year college or university. We can really spend a lot of time just developing that and talking with students and families about options, beginning to change the narrative around the social capital that exists in this community that says college, right? Because we know that social capital is tied to that college university, you know, experience for some, but you know, it's really about the kids' lives. And so let's attach the same capital to an apprenticeship, right? Let's attach that same capital to internships and attach that same capital to, programs in radiology and all of these other things that are available for kids when they, you know, we just started a partnership with Legacy Barber College, right? Some kids just, you know, they start their own business and being a barber. And, you know, 2 years ago, we started this program because it was just a connection that I had when I was getting my hair cut. But make a long story short, we started the program 2 years ago, and because of the pandemic, it's really made really complicated in getting kids involved. But now we've got a line out the door, right? And the school is paying for it, right? And so creating these kinds of options for kids and students and telling them that there are viable options is something that I really hope that we can make, that when we look back 5 to 7 years from now, that we have a department, we have a structure, we have staff, we have an infrastructure built that's really tying kids to jobs and careers and not just college.
Good evening, Dr. Campbell. Nice to see you tonight. So, given you are an internal candidate, what is your analysis for why Black and brown students are not having the same opportunities to achieve as white students? The follow-up to that question would be, what specific plans do you have to ensure more positive outcomes and equitable experiences for Black and brown students during their time at ETHS?
It's a great question, and I'm smiling because this is what I ask every teacher before they get hired at ETHS, and every administrator, and here am I answering the question. So it's very complex and layered, right? We know that these systems and structures are based in white middle-class norms that often alienate and silence and make invisible Black and brown kids, and they know it. Right? And so sometimes they find ways to resist that are both constructive and non-constructive, right? Because they are saying, I don't belong. I don't feel seen, I don't feel heard. And I think that, you know, we have to continue to work to deconstruct these norms. But I'll tell you that equal justice, I have a little note here, that equal justice is always a work in progress, right? And nothing is ever fully settled. So it's going to take some time. It's going to take some effort. It's going to take more conversation. It's going to take more training. It's going to take more of our staff and students realizing and thinking, like how are we engaging kids of color, and how are white students also engaging students of color, engaging each other, and everybody taking a reflection, a look at themselves, a look at our systems, and a look at our structures, teachers looking at their practice, and all of us looking at how we were developed and socialized. And so I hate to be so individualistic with that, but that's what it's going to take. You know, the equity work is as much about mirrors as it is about windows. And I think that we have to create the mirrors here so that we can reflect and really create the kind of structure and the kind of environment where our students of color then feel seen, then feel heard, and then feel safe, right? So that they can learn, right, when they go to class. And so the specific plans to that are, of course, definitely more training and more conversation. But there could probably also be some more programming involved with that as well for students that we know who are striving, who need more support. It's kind of like creating a tier 2 intervention with an individualistic focus, right? And we're looking at those programs, and I'm looking at different ways to engage kids that we haven't done before. We're going to have to think out of the box, right? We're going to have to continue to be innovative. We're going to have to continue to be bold. You know, if I'm fortunate enough to serve in this role, I'll be asking, you know, the board to do some very bold things, right? And maybe things that we haven't done before, but also do that in concert with the community. And bringing stakeholders to the table to really say, what does this look like, right? And not, you know, because, you know, diversity is about having the representation, right? Equity is about giving kids who need the resources. But inclusion is about having those voices at the table to talk about what the solutions really are. And so I wouldn't dare want to just pontificate alone on what that looks like, but I am committed to engaging the community of the possibilities of what that can be.
Good evening, Dr. Campbell.
Good evening.
I am Cheryl Judice, and I have to tell everybody, all you lifelong Evanstonians, I'm actually a South Sider as well, and very familiar with Lindblom Technical High School. All right, here goes my question. First of all, you know you've been here a long time. All right. So what we would like to know is, can you give us an example of a decision that you made as an assistant superintendent or principal that seemed like a great approach to how you would do something, but then later, in retrospect, you know you would do it differently if you had to do it again today?
There are many decisions. You know, they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. There were, let's say, I'm trying not to disclose too much. I don't want to disclose people's stuff and identities, but let's just say there were some decisions that I had to make, and I made the decision, which was a good decision, but I didn't have the right people with me to make the decision. And when I say that, I mean, I made a decision on behalf of folks without talking to folks, right? And that was bad. And unfortunately, that's happened multiple times. That's left some people, you know, some folks feeling some kind of way. I'll go be very specific because I know that's probably what you're asking for. You're very smart people. You know, just before the pandemic, we were, and this is connected to a different answer, as the pandemic was starting to present itself, we were preparing for crisis, right? Speaking as if we may lose people, right, in the pandemic. And instead of really working with our staff, right, I was informing the board of our plans, and our teachers were watching, and they felt very dismissed, unheard, and they felt that their lives really didn't matter. And that's the decision that I had to go back and apologize for, that I was alluding to earlier, that I didn't talk to them, right? I did not think about how those comments would have felt to them in a public forum with the board, without them being at the table. It was terrible, right? I knew we had to be prepared for the worst, but there's a way that you go about doing that. And the way that I did that was not right. And I went back to the teachers, and there was so much happening. A lot of the teachers are my friends, when they're calling me, it's like, Marcus, you gotta, and I was like, I know. And they say, based on who we know you are, we know that you already know what to do. So I called a special meeting with the staff simply to apologize, right? And to ask for forgiveness, because that was wrong. And I wish I would have done that differently.
Thank you. Dr. Campbell, Amanda and I have a question that we're going to ask together. Okay. Okay, did you? Yeah, all right. John is going to ask. Sorry about that. Okay, so the job description describes a key responsibility to, quote, design, implement, and sustain clearly defined systems to support school operations and safe learning environments. So this is something on the mind of so many folks in the community. And most everyone agrees on the theoretical goal, yet folks differ in their definition with regards to safety and the process to get there. How do you define and think about a safe and supportive learning environment? And how do you plan to lead towards this goal?
Wow, that's great. I define a safe and supportive learning environment where students, because staff are in the learning environment as well, where students and staff are free to be themselves however they are, right? Because if I don't have to worry about how my identity is going to be constructed in a space, then I can really focus. I can then be vulnerable so that I can learn, right? There is no learning without vulnerability, right? And there is no vulnerability without safety. And fostering an environment where students and staff can be themselves, their authentic selves, show up however they want to show up, is a safe learning environment. With the knowledge that they have and with the knowledge that they don't have, they can show up that way. With the identities that they carry, and if they understand what those identities are, even if they don't, they can still show up that way. And how do I foster that? First, by modeling it, right? As a superintendent, as a principal, and whatever the leaders, whatever the roles and the leaders are, we all should be modeling certain things, modeling roles and modeling practice. And that means so what are you modeling? You're modeling empathy, right? And you're modeling humility, right? And you're modeling good listening, right? And you're modeling accountability, right? And so all of those things work towards a safe environment, and I think the superintendent has to lead the leaders, right, and modeling those behaviors, and then putting some definitions and parameters around those conditions, whereby we are explicit, everyone knows what we are about and how we plan to get there, so that we can make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable to those standards.
Good evening, Dr. Campbell.
Good evening.
I just have a short follow-up question. Can you share how you expect to work together with the police department in the years to come?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, through our and I'll just talk about one arm of it. There are two arms of it. Let's talk about safety first, right? And I don't mean our safety department, but I mean school safety. And we have had a tremendous partnership with the Evanston Police Department regarding the safety of our 1.4 million square feet of space on 64 acres, right? We cannot do that alone. Right, we have to do that in concert with the police department and with the community to make sure that, you know, all 5,000 people who show up here every day feel a sense of physical safety. And we've done that with several Evanston Police Department chiefs, and we will work to continue that relationship. But then there's also the component of how do we do that and maintain the kind of relationship with the police that does not make our certain students and staff feel uncomfortable, right? Because that's a reality for a lot of people in our community, and that's very important. And so I don't quite always know what that full answer is yet, but I am committed to working with our students and working with our discipline committee and working with the police and working with the board and administrators to really figure out what that looks like, because that model doesn't exist yet. Right? It does not exist yet. And the binary of it's either this or that gets us in trouble, because we should really be looking at a both-and approach.
Good evening, Dr. Campbell.
Good evening.
With Evanston as a one high school city, the superintendent is one of the key leaders, along with our elected officials and civic leaders. What you do doesn't just impact the school system, but also the broader Evanston community, as you alluded to earlier. How do you envision the role of superintendent as a local leader, and how would you partner with organizations like Northwestern and the other major organizations in Evanston to meet the school's goals?
Right. Thank you for the question. I think that it's important that the superintendent is definitely open and partner in the discourse for what is happening within our city with all of our leaders. I think a superintendent that's not communicating and is not, I want to say, at the proverbial table is problematic. The superintendent has to be in communication with the mayor, with Northwestern, you know, the new president when she gets to town, and so many other leaders. It's important to have forums and opportunities where these leaders can get together. I know that the city schools meeting is just one avenue where the various stakeholders that you mentioned, Mr. Davis, are at that conversation. And so that also goes back to my answer about proximity, right? A leader that is proximate to other leaders, right? It's so interesting. This is what, you know, Brian Stevenson talks about all the time. If you want to solve a problem, you got to be proximate, right? And that's just resonated with me over the years and has been key to my own leadership. And I know that it is key to this particular position in this community. So being proximate with leaders, in communication with leaders and their constituents, and creating maintaining the existing structures that exist, but also building new ones that don't if the formula is not working. You know, we should all be, we're not going to be on the same page all the time, but we should at least be talking about what positions we have and really advocating for what is in the best interest of our kids and what is in the best interest of our youth. How we get there, we may differ on, but the goals, I'm sure we all are aligned.
Good evening, Dr. Campbell. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Take a deep breath.
Yes.
Because this
is one of those, huh? Okay.
Take a deep breath, because this completes our questioning of you.
Oh, okay.
So our question is, do you have any questions for us?
I do. Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you for the time again. So my first question is, what advice, there's a lot of Evanstonian knowledge and perspectives here at this table. What advice would you give the new person coming in to such an incredible opportunity? What would you say to them?
I'll go first. Dr. Campbell, I would say to learn the history of the city. I mean, everyone in Evanston has an opinion, a very strong opinion. So you have to collaborate, listen to them, filter it out, do what you have to do to make your decision from your experience also. But the most important thing is to learn the history and learn the history of the school. A lot of people have retired from this school that took just some fantastic history with them. So we have to find a way to talk to Dino maybe and get that history back, but that you need the history. To know where you're going, you have to know where you've been.
And I was going to say lead. The knowing where you've been is really important, but when we're looking for a superintendent, the community is looking for a leader, and that's a lonely place to be. And sometimes, especially when you're coming new to a position where you were here as a teacher, a younger person, there's a feeling that you want to kind of look around and see who's with you sometimes. But sometimes when you're leading, there's nobody with you because you're setting the vision for everybody that's following.
Thank you. And I would also say, you mentioned earlier about modeling the kind of behavior you seek to inspire. I would say be patient with yourself. Show grace, show empathy. I think that's going to be important to model that as a leader, to show that it's okay that you're going to make mistakes, that we don't have all the answers. But as you said, if we work together in partnership towards our shared goals, we can do some pretty amazing things. So I think you have an opportunity to, the person, hopefully you, that gets this position, has an opportunity to model that kind of behavior and just continue to show Evanstonians that we truly are all in this together and we can move together in the same direction if we do it in partnership and we give each other just a little bit of grace, because that's what we need more than anything else at this moment.
I would like to add that you spend a little time engaging with the grassroots community. There are so many people that I don't feel that they are included, that they don't really count. And having you show up at events where it's the grassroots, I think will count go a long way. In addition, I would tell you to engage with the business community. Many of your goals for and by the way, I'm delighted because, I'm with the work ethic program through the foundation, and we are trying to make certain young people that go to this school and graduate with the same sense of self-esteem as those that are going to go off to colleges and universities. And so that I think that would entail engaging with the business community in a way, learning what jobs they have that may not require a four-year college degree, and just making sure they know what your goal is.
So I would say, as someone who serves the community, the congregation where I grew up, and that you would be serving the environment that professionally helped to create you.
Oh, yeah, I definitely grew up here. I was 27.
You have a certain amount of social capital and a certain amount of support that's built in, and not to waste that, and to use it to be bold and daring. When I went to ETHS in the mid-90s, I could count on one hand the number of black teachers and the number of black classmates that I, as a honors tracked AP, white, Jewish middle-class student had. And now we're looking at an era in Evanston where potentially we have a major cultural shift where our two superintendents would be black men in their 40s leading a community of their peers, which is remarkable, and I think requires a boldness and a daring personality that says things may be different and to lead us there.
I would also add, going off of what Rabbi just said, you can't lead scared, so you lead. I keep our kids at the center and spend time at the grocery stores. Everybody got to eat. I'm not joking. I taught here. I go to Aldi. I see my students. checking me out, like, that's where people are, because everybody has to eat. So Whole Foods is great. You can go from all the groceries, like all ends. Like, make it your point to visit grocery stores after work when people are getting their food, because everyone's got to eat, and you'll get a sense of who and the voices of the community of all ranges. So that would be my advice.
Hello, Dr. Campbell. The one thing I would say, I know you've talked a lot about going out, but as a resident of the Fifth Ward, I think it's really important to make sure that the school is open to kids before they get here, and so that the community feels that they can come in, because at the same time, those are often many of the same children, that we're talking about how to make sure that they feel connected. So make the place open for, the kindergarten and third grader too.
Hi, Dr. Campbell. I would just advise you continue to communicate your plan to not just the community, your goals for whatever you're going to do with the school, if, granted the opportunity. The community, with your teachers, your staff, not just in the beginning, but maybe in the middle. If you have to change paths with that goal, just be transparent about it and just continue to communicate those.
My advice would be, remember the kids. I mean, I think that as superintendent, it's very easy to get pulled away from why you're here and what you're doing, the students that go to the school. And I mean, some of my greatest memories are Dr. Witherspoon walking through the cafeteria, saying hello, and taking that time out of his day to connect with us. And I mean, my friends, I told them that I'm doing this, and they're like, oh, we love Dr. Campbell, right? This is why you're here, and this is why you're doing it. So don't forget, or don't lose that passion you have for connecting with students, because that's why people love you, and that's why you're at this table.
I would agree. I would say to remain proximate to it. If given this opportunity to serve your community in this capacity, that you remain out and in the face of everyone and everything that's going on, because that way they feel like we're still connected to you. You're not just in an office, and you get the opportunity to develop relationships. If people feel like they can trust you, and that goes a long way. We have a lot of Evanstonians, not just us sitting at this table, but I think Mr. Fuller talked about this a bit. There's a lot of people that have a lot of opinions, right? I wouldn't say get too caught up in that, but at least being proximate and being able to listen to them, right? Being able to listen to them, that will definitely take you a long way.
I would say don't get entrenched in the institution. And I think sometimes tax structures and finances in schools, I think it's very easy to operate from a little bit of a model of scarcity. There's never going to be enough resources to do what you want to do, but innovation and creative problem solving don't come from that frame. So move us to a model of at least sufficiency and ideally abundance. And it's in that space with the partnerships and the community and everything else. I think if this school operated in a model of abundance, we could solve for a lot of things.
Well, my advice now, I'm putting my staff hat, is to keep the ear to the ground, and every voice counts, to learn the culture and to be more proximate to the Latino community, so people won't have this perception that the dialogue in ETHS is only black and white. We need to be included in the conversation, in the decision making, and you will find out that this wonderful community that now the numbers have increased in the Latino community. I think that this is the great opportunity to be closer to Latinos. Gracias, Dr. Campbell.
Well, thank you for all of those responses. And my next question, I'm asking the same two questions to everyone. I asked the other students so that you all know that. Should I be fortunate enough to serve? It kind of gets to your observation, Rabbi. at ETHS, I would be the first Black man to serve in this role. What do you think what does that mean for you, and what do you think it might mean? I don't want you to speak for the community, but what do you think it might mean for certain constituents in Evanston?
I take a lot of pride in sharing. When I decided to go into education, I reflected back on my time growing up in Evanston, and I had a Black male principal in elementary school and a Black male principal in middle school. And they were hugely influential in that process. And your influence is not just on young Black boys, right? The reach is huge, right? The world is changing, and this is an opportunity to create a model that really doesn't have places to exist, right? You're building a model, and own that, opportunity, but also, cherish it too. Enjoy the ride, and you won't always see it in the moment, right? You got to sometimes wait a decade for people to come back around and tell you.
Yeah, I think you understand more than anybody else the importance of representation. And you can't achieve something that you can't perceive. And so you are a model of Black excellence in that role. And what that means to the next generation of young Black, brown women and boys is just unimaginable. That they can be raised in a community where the superintendents of both learning institutions are Black men that are still relatively young. I think you're younger than me. So you're still very, so you're relatively young. And I would say that's just, it's so inspiring. But again, it gets back to my first point. But I think that also places a certain burden on your shoulders, that you have to be all things to all people. And I would just say, be very careful of that. Just be very careful and continue to show yourself some grace. But that's super inspiring, so.
I think the other thing, adding to that, is also, it's not just that you're a Black man, but also that your path has been here. And as we look to definitely needing more educators of color, I think you make it possible. It's not like, you came from someplace and just plopped in as the superintendent. You make it possible and visible of the path, and the more that you share your journey, I think you'll be surprised of how many young men and young women say, oh, maybe this could be a possibility for me. So it's not just being a superintendent, but it's the journey, starting even with that article, like making that article available to young people here to know that it's a journey that's plausible and open to them.
While this is a great privilege, right, for you to be a Black man and serve in this role, we could talk about how inspiring this is, and while it very much is, but some people are not going to appreciate that. And it's important that, as Jesse said, that you remember the children, and that you remember that article, and that you remember the steps that you took to get to the place where you hopefully will be, and continue to, as you stated, to be that model, to be that person that our Black boys can look at and say, you know what, I can do that. It's being the example. They've seen you, right? They've seen you come from one position to another. So they know that it's possible, but it can get scary, and it may feel like sometimes, why did I even do this? Death threats. I'm just saying this is the reality of it. But as long as you remember what you did this for and how you got here, you have more people with you, even though the voices are louder. Maybe louder of the ones that may be against you. You have more people with you that are certainly against you.
Along those lines, it fills me with great pride at the possibility for you being the next superintendent. And I think not only are you a Black man, I know that your perspective and your understanding of not only the history of this community and of schooling and of education, obviously, is top-notch, but of people and the intersectionality of people and the individuality of people and your understanding of systems, your understanding of, our beyond that black-white binary that was just talked about, right? That's so important, and that is what makes, I think, you so threatening to some folks who are not with you, because you have all of that, right? That's not something that everybody has, and certainly not every black man has. So that's something that you uniquely have. And so knowing who you are and remembering that and remembering the kids, I think is just really important. And I am super excited about the possibility of what the Campbell era will look like, a decade from now. So wish you all the best, and I'm excited for what, the future holds for our community under your leadership in that capacity.
That's all I have. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that it's so exciting, and it's the perspective and your real life experience and your dedication to being proximate. And my only thought would say, stay away from Facebook. Because your showing up in real life is what matters. And the people who will show up with you and around you in real life are what matters. It's so easy to type your angriest and least self-thought into the ether on a device in your pocket, but it takes real courage and real dedication to do the kind of proximal work that you're talking about. And to continue to do that in real life and real time is where the real relationships happen. And for your own mental health and sanity, create that space for yourself, because it's not as real as what you're doing here, and it's so important.
I was just going to add, Dr. Campbell, the perspective of Northwestern students that you work with, because those are, the next generation of teachers and educators and policymakers. And so many, they learn so much from you and have in the different roles in the, activities as they're involved in partnership here, and then, in the courses that you teach in the School of Education and Social Policy. And what came to mind when you asked that question were two comments from students. So we have a first-year PhD student who is working here in the building, who said to me a few weeks ago, "There is so much love and light here. And I need more of that in my life." And she is a young Black queer woman. And that just is amazing. And then the other thing, so many students that we've had from Northwestern who have been involved in the social consciousness series here that share marginalized identities. And so many of them, just so many different versions of, this would never have happened at my high school. My high school did not see me, did not hear me, just different versions of that over and over again. So, your reach and your impact is beyond, and with students that you have never even met. So thank you for that.
Well, I want to thank all of you for your kind words and your affirmations and the time that you've spent to just share with me and to pour into me and to share those thoughts. So I really appreciate that. And I'm delighted that I got an opportunity to have a conversation with you this evening. So thank you very much.